My name is Emily Parker. I'm 38 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I believed my life was stable in the way that mattered. Not perfect, but structured, predictable, earned. I work as a logistics coordinator for a regional food distribution company in Philadelphia. My job is mostly schedules, inventory reports, and making sure trucks actually arrive where they are supposed to. It is not glamorous work, but it is stable, and it pays the mortgage. Most of my days start early. I am usually up before 6 o'clock, checking overnight delivery updates before heading into the office near the warehouse district. By the time most people in the city are getting coffee, I have already dealt with 3 scheduling problems. I like that kind of work. Systems, causes and effects, problems that can be traced, understood, and fixed. Life, at least in my experience, is easier when things follow logic. Daniel Carter is 36, my boyfriend. He works in corporate communications for a large consulting firm downtown. Confident, social, the kind of man who can walk into a room and immediately belong there. He knows how to speak so people listen, how to smile at the right moment, how to adjust himself depending on who's watching. We had been together for almost 10 years, living together for 7. About 2 years ago, we bought a row house in South Philadelphia. The mortgage was manageable. The commute worked for both of us. On paper, everything aligned. For a long time, it felt balanced. My life was structured, operational. His was built around networking, presentations, and visibility. Daniel has always had a sharp personality. Confident is the polite way to describe it. Blunt is probably more accurate. He had a habit of talking to people like they were slightly inconvenient if they were not useful to him. That attitude showed up with waiters sometimes. Occasionally with coworkers he thought were incompetent. Every once in a while it showed up with me, usually after a stressful day. I ignored it. Not because I didn't notice, but because I understood the environment he worked in. Corporate reputation jobs attract a certain kind of personality, competitive, polished, controlled. Daniel was very good at what he did, and I respected that. The first change I noticed was small. Daniel started mentioning someone from work more often than anyone else. His ex-girlfriend, Vanessa. At first, it sounded completely normal. They were planning a large company charity gala together. According to Daniel, it was one of the biggest events his department had organized in years. I heard about Vanessa constantly. Vanessa handled sponsor relations. Vanessa was managing stage logistics. Vanessa was apparently the only person at the company who actually understood how large events were supposed to run. It wasn't just how often he mentioned her. It was the tone he used when he did. At first, I treated it like normal work talk. Daniel had worked on plenty of events before, and there was always someone he mentioned a lot during the planning stage. But this felt slightly different. Usually when Daniel talked about coworkers, it came with criticism attached. Someone was slow. Someone didn't understand the politics. Someone needed him to fix their mistakes. With Vanessa, the tone shifted. He still sounded irritated sometimes, but underneath it, there was something else. Respect. Attention. He would say things like, "Vanessa is the only one here who actually understands how these events are supposed to run." Or, "I had to redo half the planning because everyone else was useless, except Vanessa. She actually kept up." Then he would roll his eyes like the entire situation exhausted him. It was a strange mix. Complaints on the surface, but a lot of focus underneath. The second change was his schedule. Corporate events require long hours. I knew that. So when Daniel said he had late planning meetings for the gala, I didn't question it at first. But those meetings started happening 3 or 4 nights a week. Sometimes he would text that he was grabbing drinks with the planning team after a meeting. Sometimes he would just say the meeting ran late. When he came home, Vanessa was always part of the story. Vanessa argued with sponsors. Vanessa fixed a disaster with the lighting company. Vanessa saved the entire event budget by renegotiating a contract. After a few weeks, it started to stand out. Her name came up more than anyone else's. One night, we were having dinner, and Daniel was complaining about work again. He said Vanessa was impossible to deal with because she thought she knew everything about event logistics. Then he added something that stayed with me. "At least she actually knows what she's doing," he said, which is more than I can say for half the people in that office. The way he said it didn't sound like frustration. It sounded like admiration. I didn't accuse him of anything. At that point, all I had were small inconsistencies and a lot of mentions of one person. But something in the back of my mind started paying closer attention. Patterns. I've always trusted patterns more than emotions, because patterns don't lie. After that dinner, I stopped treating everything Daniel said as background noise. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions that sounded like accusations. I just paid attention. And once I started paying attention, the details didn't feel random anymore. They started lining up. One of the first things I noticed was his phone. Daniel had never been secretive about it before. We weren't the kind of couple who checked each other's messages, but his phone had always just been there, on the table, on the counter, within reach but not protected. Now it was different. If he stood up, the phone went with him. If he walked into the kitchen, it was in his hand. If he went to the bathroom, it disappeared into his pocket. And when he left it on the table, it was always face down. Always. At first, I told myself I was overanalyzing it. People get busy. People get stressed. People change small habits. But then the second pattern showed up, his mood. Daniel had always been blunt, but recently, that edge had sharpened. It didn't take much to set him off. One night, I asked a simple question about the gala timeline. He had been talking about it for weeks, so I thought it was a normal thing to ask. What time does everything actually start? I said, while setting plates on the table. He didn't even look up from his phone. If you had any idea how much work goes into events like this, he said, you wouldn't keep asking basic questions. The words weren't loud, but they were sharp, precise, and unnecessary. I paused for a second, then nodded like it didn't matter. But it did, because Daniel liked explaining things, especially his work. It made him feel important. This was different. This felt like distance, like I had become something inconvenient. The strangest moment happened about 2 weeks before the event. I got home early. A shipment had been canceled, so there was no reason to stay late at the warehouse. It wasn't planned, just one of those small changes that happens during a normal workday. When I walked into the house, Daniel was sitting on the couch, texting. He looked up the second the door opened, and for a split second, something crossed his face. Not annoyance, not confusion, surprise. The kind of surprise that doesn't come from seeing someone you live with. The kind that comes from being seen when you didn't expect to be. You're home early, he said. His tone wasn't warm. It was alert. I shrugged, set my keys on the counter. Shipment got canceled, I said. Figured I'd head back. He nodded quickly. Too quickly. Then he locked his phone. Face down. On the table. Just like that, the moment passed. Or at least that's how it looked on the surface. Later that evening, he brought up Vanessa again. Apparently, they had spent most of the day finalizing sponsor seating and reviewing the stage schedule. Then he mentioned casually that they were probably going to grab drinks the next night after work to go over final details. That was when I decided to test something. Not dramatic. Not confrontational. Just simple. That's near my office, right? I said. I could stop by for one drink. It sounded casual. Because it was supposed to. Daniel didn't hesitate. No, he said immediately. The answer came too fast. It would be awkward, he added. It's a work discussion. Vanessa is very focused about keeping things professional. I nodded slowly. Because that explanation didn't match anything I had heard about her. From the way Daniel described Vanessa, professional boundaries didn't seem like her priority. But I didn't challenge it. I just let the silence sit there for a second. Then I changed the subject. On the outside, nothing happened. Dinner continued. Conversation moved on. But internally, something shifted. Because that wasn't a coincidence. That was a pattern confirming itself. I didn't go looking for proof. Not in the way people expect. No checking his phone. No passwords. No late-night searches. I didn't need any of that. Daniel had already given me everything I needed. I just had to stop ignoring it. For example, he had mentioned the hotel where the gala was going to take place. A large venue near Center City. One that hosted corporate events all the time. 10 days before the event, he texted me in the afternoon. Working late again. Final stage walkthrough running longer than expected. Probably drinks after. The message looked identical to the ones he had sent before. Same structure, same tone, same explanation. And maybe that was the problem. It was too consistent, like something repeated often enough that it stopped needing detail. Normally, I would have accepted it without thinking. But that day, something felt off. I finished work around 5. Sat in my car for a minute. Then instead of driving home, I turned toward Center City. I told myself I just needed a drink. To clear my head. To reset. The hotel he mentioned had a bar attached to it. Open to the public. Neutral space. No expectations. When I walked in, the place was already busy. People in suits. Low conversations. Glasses clinking. I scanned the room once. Didn't see him. For a second, I almost left. Because part of me wasn't sure what I was expecting to find. But then I looked again, and I saw them. Daniel was sitting in a corner booth. Across from him. No, not across. Next to him. Vanessa. I had never met her before, but I knew immediately. She looked exactly like the kind of person Daniel described. Polished. Confident. Comfortable being seen. They weren't sitting like coworkers finishing a meeting. They were sitting close. Too close. Daniel's arm was stretched along the back of the booth, resting behind her shoulders. Vanessa leaned toward him when she spoke, and when she laughed, she touched his arm. Light, familiar, like it wasn't the first time. I stood there for a second, just watching. No anger, no rush, just observation. Because once you see something clearly, you don't need to interpret it. You just understand it. Then Daniel leaned in and kissed her. Not quick, not hesitant, not accidental, comfortable, like something already established. That was the moment everything simplified. There was no confusion left, no explanation that could fix it, no version of events where this meant something else. My boyfriend was having an affair. And somehow, I didn't feel explosive. I didn't feel like yelling. I didn't feel like walking over there and confronting them. What I felt was clarity, the kind that removes doubt completely. I stayed for another minute, just long enough to confirm that what I saw wasn't misinterpreted. Then I turned, walked out of the bar, and stepped back into the street. The noise of the city felt distant, muted, like it didn't quite reach me. I got into my car, sat there, hands on the wheel, and for the first time since this started, I stopped asking questions because I already had the answer. The only thing left now was deciding what to do with it. On the drive home, I didn't replay what I had seen. I didn't need to. There was nothing unclear about it. No missing context, no alternative interpretation. Daniel and Vanessa weren't co-workers crossing a line. They were already past it. What mattered now wasn't understanding it. It was deciding what came next. For the rest of that evening, I did nothing. I went home, made dinner, set the table. At exactly 8:42, the front door opened. Daniel walked in like he always did, after a late meeting. Slightly tired, jacket loosened, phone in his hand. "Hey," he said. Normal. Completely normal. I looked up from the kitchen. "Hey." I watched him for a second. Not emotionally. Analytically. If I hadn't seen what I saw earlier that night, nothing about this moment would have stood out. That was the part that settled something inside me. The gap between what was real and what he was presenting. He kissed my cheek lightly on his way past me. Routine. Practiced. "Long day," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. I nodded. "Yeah." He started talking about the gala almost immediately. Schedules. Last-minute adjustments. How chaotic everything was because the event was only days away. Vanessa came up within the first 2 minutes. Of course she did. Vanessa had to step in again today, he said, pulling a glass from the cabinet. Lighting team screwed up the stage angles. She basically fixed the entire thing. His tone carried that same strange mix. Irritation layered over admiration. I leaned against the counter, arms loosely crossed. "Sounds like she's handling a lot," I said. He let out a short laugh. "She always does," he replied. "Honestly, she's the only one there who actually knows what she's doing." There it was again. That line. Recycled. Refined. Delivered like a fact. I watched him for a second longer than usual. He didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. Dinner passed like every other night. Conversation. Small comments. Fragments of his day. Except now every word had context. Every mention of Vanessa wasn't just information. It was confirmation. Later that night, when we were sitting on the couch, his phone lit up. He glanced at it quickly. Locked it. Face down. Without responding. I didn't ask who it was. Because I already knew. And for the first time since this started, I felt something settle into place. Not anger. Not sadness. Resolution. The next morning, I made a decision. Not impulsive. Not emotional. Practical. During my lunch break, I stepped outside the warehouse office. The air smelled faintly like diesel and warm asphalt. Normal. Grounding. I pulled out my phone and called a divorce attorney. The decision had been forming since the moment I left that bar. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. The receptionist answered. Calm, professional. I explained, briefly, that I needed to speak with someone about ending a long-term relationship involving shared property. She transferred me. The lawyer asked direct questions. Do we own property together? Yes. How long have we lived together? 7 years. Any children? No. The answers came easily, because they were facts, not emotions. He explained the basics, what separation would look like, how property division typically worked, what the first steps would be. Then he said something that aligned perfectly with how I was already thinking. If you're certain, he said, it's usually better to prepare everything before you confront him. It keeps things clean. Clean. That word stayed with me. By the end of the call, I had scheduled an in-person meeting for Thursday afternoon. The gala was Saturday night. That timing felt precise, deliberate. On Thursday, I left work early and drove into Center City. The lawyer's office was near Market Street. Modern building, quiet lobby, neutral tones. The kind of place designed to keep emotions contained. The meeting itself was straightforward. I explained everything. Length of the relationship, the house, no children, and the affair. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't need to. The facts were enough. He nodded, took notes, asked a few clarifying questions. Then he explained something I already suspected. Legally, he said, the affair doesn't change much. The focus will be on dividing assets fairly. That didn't surprise me. This wasn't about legal advantage. It was about closure, control. We went through paperwork, financial disclosures, property details, initial filing documents. Near the end of the meeting, he looked up at me. When are you planning to tell him? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Saturday, I said. He paused slightly. The gala? I nodded. He'll be speaking, I added, closing the event. The lawyer studied me for a second. Not judgmental, just assessing. Are you planning a confrontation? He asked. I shook my head. No, I said calmly. I'm planning clarity. That was the difference. I wasn't interested in yelling or creating a scene. I just wanted the truth to exist in the same space Daniel had been carefully controlling. The lawyer nodded slowly. That's your choice, he said. You can serve the documents whenever you want. By the time I left his office, everything was prepared. The documents were sealed in a clean envelope. Simple, final. Friday evening felt almost surreal. Daniel was fully immersed in the gala. Laptop open, phone constantly active. Messages coming in. Vanessa's name appearing in conversation like a recurring theme. She's handling stage timing now, he said at one point, not even looking up. Honestly, if she wasn't there, this whole thing would fall apart. I sat across from him, watching quietly. He had no idea. That was the part that stood out the most. Not the betrayal, not even the lies. The certainty. He believed he was in control of the situation. That everything was contained, managed, hidden. Saturday afternoon, he left early. Dressed perfectly, focused, confident. I'll see you tonight, he said casually, grabbing his keys. I nodded. Good luck, I replied. He smiled. The same easy, practiced smile he used in every room that mattered. Then he left. The house went quiet. For a moment, I stood in the center of the living room, just listening to the absence of sound. Then I moved, got dressed, picked up the envelope from the kitchen counter, and walked out the door. The drive into Center City felt calm, not tense, not dramatic, just steady, like every other decision I had made this week. By the time I reached the hotel, the ballroom was already filling with people. Suits, dresses, conversations layered over soft music. I stepped inside and immediately saw them, Daniel and Vanessa, standing near the stage. Close, coordinated, like they belonged next to each other. Staff moved around them, adjusting microphones, checking lighting, asking questions. Daniel answered. Vanessa added details. They operated like a unit. From across the room, it looked seamless, professional, successful. I found a table near the back, sat down, and watched. Not as his partner, not as someone emotionally involved, just as someone observing the final stage of a process that had already ended. The event unfolded exactly the way Daniel had described it. Speeches, donor acknowledgments, polite applause. At one point, I saw them leave the main floor together, disappear into a hallway near the stage. They came back 10 minutes later, laughing, relaxed, unaware. Most people in the room saw two professionals managing a high-profile event. I saw something else entirely. And I waited, because I wasn't here to interrupt. I was here to finish something. Around 9:30, the room began to shift. You could feel it before anything was announced. The subtle change in energy. People straightening in their seats. Conversations fading. Attention moving toward the stage. The closing segment. Daniel stepped slightly to the side as one of the executives took the microphone. A polished speech followed. Numbers, impact, gratitude. The kind of words designed to make people feel like they had participated in something meaningful. I barely listened, because my focus wasn't on the speech. It was on him. Daniel stood near the edge of the stage, posture relaxed, expression confident. Every so often, someone would lean in to say something to him, and he would nod like everything was exactly as it should be. Vanessa stood close by, not too close, but close enough. Their proximity wasn't accidental. It never had been. And now, the executive said, voice lifting slightly, I'd like to invite the person who made tonight possible to say a few final words. Applause started immediately. Daniel stepped forward, confident, controlled, completely at ease. He walked to the center of the stage like he belonged there, because in his world, he did. He adjusted the microphone slightly, smiled, and began. Thank you all for being here tonight. His voice carried easily across the room, smooth, measured, professional. I had heard parts of this speech before, fragments of it at the kitchen table, pieces of it while he stood in the living room rehearsing under his breath. But hearing it now, in this room with all these people watching him, it sounded different, more complete, more intentional. He talked about teamwork, about coordination, about the importance of trust. That word almost made me smile. Trust. He thanked the sponsors, the donors, the team that made everything possible. Vanessa's name came up. Of course it did. She was instrumental in making this event what it is tonight, he said, glancing briefly in her direction. She smiled. Subtle, contained, like this was expected, like she belonged in that acknowledgement. The audience applauded again. Everything about the moment was polished, carefully constructed, and completely false. I sat there quietly, hands resting on the table, waiting, because I had already decided. I wasn't interrupting him. He would finish. He would have his moment. And then, so would I. When he reached the end of the speech, his tone shifted slightly. Closing cadence, gratitude, final emphasis. Thank you, he said, stepping back from the microphone. The applause came quickly, loud, sustained. Daniel stood there, smiling, absorbing it. Vanessa watched from the side of the stage, satisfied, proud. For a second, if you didn't know the truth, it looked like success, like everything had worked exactly the way it was supposed to. The applause lasted longer than I expected. People stood, some out of respect, some out of habit. Eventually, it began to fade. The room settled. Movement started again, chairs shifting, voices rising. That was when I stood up. No rush, no hesitation. I walked toward the stage at a steady pace. No one stopped me. No one questioned it. From a distance, I probably looked like I belonged there. By the time I reached the front, Daniel saw me, and everything changed. His expression shifted, confusion, then irritation, then something sharper, something closer to alarm. He hadn't expected me. That much was clear. I stepped onto the stage. One of the event staff moved slightly, like they were about to intervene. Daniel lifted his hand just enough to stop them. Recognition. Control. He stepped closer to the microphone. "This is Emily," he said, forcing a small smile. "My partner." Polite applause followed. Scattered. Uncertain. Most people probably assumed this was planned. Part of the program. A personal moment after the speech. I walked to the center, took the microphone, and for a second, I just stood there, looking at him. Not angry, not emotional, just present. Then I spoke. "I just wanted to say congratulations," I said calmly. "This was a successful event." That part was true, and it mattered that it was, because what came next wasn't about distortion. It was about clarity. The room quieted again. Not completely, but enough. "There's just one more thing I need to do tonight," I continued. That was the moment the air shifted. You could feel it. The way conversations stopped mid-sentence. The way attention snapped back into place. Daniel's smile faded slightly. He leaned closer. "Emily," he started. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I just kept going. "Earlier this week," I said, "I stopped by the hotel bar." Silence. Complete now. "I saw Daniel there," I continued, "with Vanessa." A ripple moved through the room. Subtle, but unmistakable. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Stop," he said under his breath. I didn't look at him. I looked at the audience. Because this wasn't a private conversation. Not anymore. They weren't there as co-workers, I said. They were there as a couple. The words landed clean. No emotion attached. Just fact. Vanessa's expression changed first. The confidence dropped, replaced by something tighter. Controlled panic. Daniel tried to interrupt again. "Emily, this isn't—" "I saw everything," I said, cutting across him without raising my tone. "The booth, the way they were sitting, the way they were touching each other." The room didn't move, didn't breathe. "And the kiss," I added. That was the point where it became undeniable. No ambiguity, no interpretation, just truth. Daniel went still. Vanessa looked away. For the first time since I had known him, Daniel didn't have a response. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, placed it gently on the podium in front of him. The sound was soft, but it carried. "These are the final steps," I said. He stared at it, like it didn't make sense, like his brain needed more time to catch up. "They've already been prepared," I continued. "You'll hear from the lawyer on Monday." A whisper started somewhere in the room, then stopped, because no one wanted to be the first to break the silence. Daniel finally leaned toward the microphone. "Emily, what are you doing?" he asked. His voice was controlled, but underneath it, there was panic. "I'm finishing something you already started," I said, and that was the truth. I stepped back slightly. Gave him space, not out of kindness, but because I was done. Before turning away, I added one last thing. You can keep working with Vanessa, I said calmly, just not as my partner anymore. Then I let go of the microphone and walked off the stage. No rush, no hesitation. Behind me, the room stayed suspended in that strange, heavy silence. The kind that only happens when something carefully constructed falls apart all at once. I didn't look back. Not at Daniel, not at Vanessa, not at the room full of people trying to process what they had just witnessed. There was nothing behind me that needed my attention anymore. As I stepped off the stage, I could feel it starting. The shift. Whispers. Low, uncertain voices breaking through the silence. Chairs scraping softly against the floor. The first cracks in a room that had been built on control and presentation. I walked straight through the ballroom, past tables of people who suddenly seemed very interested in anything except eye contact. Past waiters standing still, unsure whether to continue working or disappear. Past the carefully arranged version of reality Daniel had just finished presenting. By the time I reached the doors, the noise had started to return. Not normal, but not silent anymore. I pushed them open and stepped into the lobby. The air felt different, lighter, like something had been released. I kept walking through the glass entrance, out into the night. The city was exactly the same as it had been when I arrived. Traffic moving, people passing. Nothing changed, except everything had. About 30 seconds after I stepped outside, my phone vibrated. Daniel. I looked at the screen for a moment, let it ring, then declined it. A second later, it rang again, then again. By the time I reached my car, there were already 3 missed calls. 2 messages. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. Whatever he had to say now, it didn't matter. I sat in the driver's seat for a second, hands resting on the wheel, breathing steady, and then I finished the last step. I blocked his number. Not just calls, everything. Messages, apps, social media. Clean, complete. Some people might think that's extreme, but it wasn't. It was efficient. There was nothing left to discuss. No conversation that would change what had already happened. No explanation that would make it different. The next communication between us would go through lawyers, exactly the way it should. I started the engine, pulled out into the street, and drove. Not toward the house. That part was already done. Instead, I crossed the river into New Jersey. The apartment I had rented earlier that week was waiting. Small, 1 bedroom, fully furnished. Nothing personal, just a place to exist without interruption. I had arranged it after meeting with the lawyer, not because I was unsure, but because I was certain. Certainty requires preparation. The building was quiet. The hallway smelled faintly like cleaning supplies and something neutral. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, closed it behind me. And for the first time all day, there was no noise, no performance, no version of reality being managed, just stillness. I set my bag down on the small kitchen counter, placed my keys beside it, and stood there for a moment, letting everything settle. There was no dramatic release, no breakdown, just quiet. The kind that comes after something ends exactly the way it needed to. Monday morning, the paperwork was officially filed. From that point forward, everything moved through my lawyer. Structured, organized, clean, exactly how I preferred things. I never spoke to Daniel again. Not directly, not once. From what I heard later, through mutual acquaintances, indirect conversations, fragments that reached me without effort, the gala didn't stay memorable for its fundraising numbers. People talked. Of course they did. About the stage, about the timing, about the moment everything shifted. Vanessa's name came up. So did Daniel's. Apparently, he transferred offices a couple of months later, quietly. No announcement. Just gone. Vanessa stayed for a while, but the environment changed. It always does when something private becomes public. Eventually, she left too. As for me, life became quiet again. Not empty. Not lonely. Just predictable. Earned. The way it had been before. I went back to work. Back to early mornings. Back to schedules that made sense. Problems that had solutions. Systems that could be understood. And for the first time in a long time, there were no inconsistencies left to analyze. No patterns that didn't align. Just clarity. And honestly, that was all I ever wanted.